December 1945. Snow fell softly over the English countryside, coating the barbed wire fences and wooden watchtowers of the British POW camp in a calm, deceptive peace. Inside, hundreds of German women prisoners huddled together, breath misting in the cold air, their minds drifting between memories of home and the quiet uncertainty of what tomorrow might bring. For many, this was their second Christmas away from Germany. The war had ended, but for them, freedom still seemed a distant dream, one wrapped in the frost and silence of captivity. The camp was nothing like the propaganda had warned them about. It wasn't filled with brutality or hunger. Rather, it was structured, disciplined, but oddly humane. The British Guards, most of whom were ordinary young men who had spent years in war themselves, carried out their duties with restraint. They watched over these women who, just months ago, had belonged to the enemy. Now, the same soldiers who once feared them, pitied them. Among the prisoners was a young German nurse named Lissalette Weber. She had been captured near Bremen while tending to wounded soldiers. Her hands were gentle, her face marked by the exhaustion of war, yet her eyes still held an unmistakable kindness, the sort that even years of destruction couldn't extinguish. She had lost 2 brothers in the war, and her father in a bombing raid. Now, she found herself behind foreign fences, with only the faint memory of her mother's lullabies to comfort her. As Christmas approached, something unusual began to stir in the camp. Rumors spread. Whispers that the British officers were planning something unexpected. Some said it was just a formality to keep morale stable, others that it was propaganda for journalists. But the truth, as they would soon learn, was far more human than political. On the morning of December 23rd, the camp commander, Captain Richard Alden, called his men together. He was a man of principle, a veteran of North Africa, who had seen both the cruelty of war and the rare flashes of decency that made it bearable. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice echoing through the cold barracks, "the war is over. And though they were once our enemies, they are now our responsibility. This Christmas, I want them to remember that humanity doesn't end at the edge of a uniform." That afternoon, a quiet transformation began. Soldiers cleared a section of the mess hall. They scrubbed the long wooden tables, strung up paper decorations made by the guards' children, and borrowed small pine trees from the nearby village. The local women, still grieving their own sons lost in battle, baked loaves of bread, plum puddings, and meat pies. The aroma began to drift through the camp, a scent none of the German women had smelled in years. Lissalette and the others watched in disbelief as the guards worked. "What is happening?" whispered Greta, another prisoner who had once been a teacher. "It smells like Christmas, but that cannot be for us." Next day, Christmas Eve, the British Guards opened the main gate leading to the hall. "All prisoners are invited to attend," one of them announced. The women looked at each other in stunned silence. For a moment, no one moved. It seemed like a cruel joke, until they saw Captain Alden himself standing at the door, his cap tucked under his arm, gesturing politely for them to come inside. Tentatively, they stepped forward. The warmth of the hall enveloped them like a memory. Candles flickered along the tables. There was laughter, hesitant at first, but real. British soldiers sat beside German nurses. As translators helped bridge the awkward pauses, and plates of hot food were passed down the line. The sound of cutlery against porcelain filled the air, replacing the metallic clink of ration tins. Lissalette sat near the end of the table, across from a young British corporal named Thomas Reeves, who couldn't have been more than 21. He smiled shyly as he offered her a slice of turkey. "Merry Christmas," he said, his accent soft and unfamiliar to her ears. She hesitated before replying, for German-laced English, fragile but sincere. "Merry Christmas." Around them, conversations slowly began to bloom. Some talked about their families, others about the snow, and a few even dared to share stories from the front lines. For the first time, enemies found common ground in pain, loss, and shared humanity. Later that evening, the camp chaplain began to play an old carol on a borrowed piano. Silent Night. The melody filled the room, and something remarkable happened. The German women began to sing softly in their own language. Still no hot. Hallig no hot. The British soldiers joined in, singing the English version, 2 languages, once divided by war, now intertwined under the same roof. Even the guards who stood watch outside could feel the harmony drifting through the winter air. Captain Alden, standing at the edge of the hall, watched with quiet pride. He knew that history would likely forget this moment. A few hours of peace in a world still recovering from chaos, but he also knew it was worth remembering. When the dinner ended, the German women were allowed to take small gifts, knitted scarves, chocolate bars, or postcards with winter scenes. To them, it was more than generosity. It was a sign that they were seen not as prisoners, but as people. Once again, in the days that followed, the camp changed. The women began to smile more. Some helped British nurses in the infirmary. Others wrote letters of gratitude. One letter, written by Liv, was later found in the archives of the Red Cross. It read, "We came here with fear, expecting hatred. Instead, we found kindness." They reminded us that even when the world burns, humanity can still light a candle. Months later, when the German women were finally released, they left behind hand-sewn ornaments. On the barracks walls, small stars, stitched from old uniform cloth. Silent thank you to those who had treated them with dignity in their darkest days. Years after the war, a BBC journalist tracked down some of the people who were there that Christmas. One of them was Thomas Reeves, the young British corporal who had served food to LaSalle. He smiled when asked about it. She was quiet, graceful. "I never forgot her. That night, I realized war didn't destroy everything. Not kindness, not compassion." He paused, eyes distant. "She gave me a small piece of her scarf when she left. I still have it. Reminds me that peace doesn't start with governments. It starts with moments like that." Even decades later, when the world had long moved on, survivors of both sides would speak of that single night when fences felt invisible, when prisoners and guards broke bread as equals, and when Christmas in a war-torn world became a lesson in forgiveness. It wasn't just a dinner. It was a quiet revolution of the heart, hidden inside a camp, surrounded by barbed wire, on a frozen December night during the Second World War.